Hey guys, it is Patrick, and before you dive into this lesson, I wanted you to know that you're about to start a new section of Principles of Accounting, and you can actually head to my website at www.patrickleemsa.com, where you can actually purchase and then download and then print the worksheets that go along with this lesson and all of the lessons that are connected to this section of Principles of Accounting. It's a great way to take notes so that you can actually concentrate on what I'm teaching you in our lessons, and then you can able to write notes along with the notes that I am showing on your screen. So all you have to do is head to my website at www.patrickleemsa.com. There you can purchase them and then download them, and then you can use them on this and all of the lessons that are connected to this section. So go ahead and do that. And if you are ready, let's head into our first lesson in this section right now. Hey guys, welcome to section 5 of financial accounting, or principles of accounting. In section 5, we're going to talk about 3 things. Specifically, we're going to talk about fraud, then internal controls, and then finally cash. And I'm going to show you how fraud and internal controls is an important topic to understand in part to our discussion of cash. But before we do that, let's kind of circle back and summarize what we've learned so far in this course. So in this course, we talked a lot about the basics of accounting. So the first 4 sections is all about the basics of accounting, the fundamental aspects of the mechanics of how accountants do their jobs, for everything from the debits and credits to the journal entries, and then finally the financial statements. From this point on, what we're going to be doing is we're going to kind of take your fundamental knowledge and add on to it. So a lot of these topics that you're going to see in the rest of the sections in this course is going to be all about certain topics that we've maybe talked about or discussed, but expanding your knowledge about them. So for instance, we've talked about cash a bit. This section, we're going to expand your understanding of cash. So that's kind of how all of this is going to be different from the first 4 sections that we've already went through. So let's get to this lesson. In this lesson, we're going to give you an introduction to fraud. And this is one of the most important things that accountants have to deal with because of cash and the susceptibility of theft in cash. And so fraud is an important topic. So let's talk about fraud. What is fraud? Well, fraud is an attempt to deceive others for personal gain. So you're deceiving someone else for some type of personal gain. Typically it's monetary, at least that's how we think about fraud, but sometimes it might not be direct monetary. It may be indirect monetary or some indirect benefit that we might get from the fraud actually happening. Now, there are 3 categories of fraud. The first one is corruption. The second one is asset misappropriation. And then the third one is financial statement fraud. And we're going to cover all 3 of these individually, but these are kind of our 3 categories. So if we're going to take a fraud, we can put it into one of these 3 specific categories as we relate it to accounting. So let's talk about each one of them individually. We're going to start with corruption. So what is corruption? Corruption is the misuse of one's position for inappropriate personal gain. Now the key word in this is misusing one's position for an inappropriate personal gain. Now, an example of this would be a politician who receives cash to help a business permit bypass city environmental approvals. So this politician who has theoretical power takes a bribe to push a city's or a business's permit, so it bypasses certain rules that everybody else has to follow. So that obviously that politician has some type of position that they are misusing. If they weren't a politician, they wouldn't have gotten those funds. They wouldn't have been able to push a business's permit past the city's environmental approval. So that's an example of a corruption case. Now, the politician pockets the money because of his or her position. The politician is able to help the business's permit bypass the proper approval channels because of their position. So corruption is one thing that we got to think about. And where this relates to businesses is that upper management has power, they have a high position, and those management or managers can take bribes and be corrupt in their way of trying to one up everybody else for personal gain. So we got to be worried about that. All right, moving on to asset misappropriation. Now, this is a big fancy word for theft or embezzlement from an organization. So this is what we like to call a blue collar crime, although white collar does happen here, but this is really, if we're drilling it down, this is a blue collar crime. I'm going to talk about what white collar crime might look like in the next section here, but typically done by employees of a company. And the reason why is because employees typically have access to assets of the company, and those employees can walk away with those assets. So for instance, if you worked at a grocery store, you have access to the inventory of a company, and it might be easy for you to slip something into your bag on your way out of the store. So that is asset misappropriation. Now, cash is often the biggest asset being misappropriated, but can be almost anything an employee has access to. So it might be a little bit hard for the employee to steal cash, but they can steal inventory, products, asset, you name it. As long as they have access to it, they could technically steal it. With technology today and payments being cashless, with credit cards and Apple Pay and electronic transfers, it's harder for employees to steal cash because they don't have access to it any longer. Now, the last one here is financial statement fraud. With financial statement fraud, this is misrepresentation of the amounts in the financial statement. This is called cooking the books. So if you've heard that term, cooking the books, that's what this is. They're changing the numbers to make it look like something better than they really are. Now, typically it points the financial statements in a positive light. Why increase expenses? It makes no sense. So typically when we look at a financial statement, it's moving it towards a positive light, not a negative light. So you would increase your revenues more than what they should be. You're decreasing expenses more than they should be. But it usually doesn't mean that a company is inflating their expenses, because it doesn't make sense for them to inflate the expenses, because it doesn't put the company's books in a good financial light. So it's important to understand that usually there is a reason to increase something like revenue, but not increase something like expenses. Now, why would you do that? Well, it puts that company in a better position financially, or makes it look like the company's in a better position financially. And because of that, maybe they are a public company, so their stock price rises. Well, that executive who cooked the books owns a whole bunch of stock in that company. If they see the increase of price of that stock, that executive can sell it and make money that way. So again, usually we're manipulating the financial statements for some indirect gain later on that we can take advantage of. Now, this is typically a white collar crime, because the people that must have access to the financial statements need to make this crime work. And the blue collar individual doesn't have access to the financial statement, but the white collar individual does. Okay. Now, what about fraud in today's world? Well, fraud occurs every day, whether it's an asset misappropriation, corruption, or financial statement fraud. For you as either a business manager or as an accountant, you need to be aware of what is going on in your organization. So as we're talking about fraud, some of this you might go, well, I already know that. Well, we're trying to bring it up in front of your mind as far as thinking about how all of this comes together, because if you're not aware of it, you might be seeing assets being misappropriated. You might see executives around you become corrupt, and so you're kind of blindsided by it. In reality, you should actually have your fingers on the pulse of all of that fraud. So thinking about that and understanding that. So that's an introduction to fraud. Hope you enjoyed this lesson, and we'll see you in the next video. Hey guys, it is Patrick. Don't forget to press the like button and share this video with someone who could get a lot of use from watching this lesson, like maybe a classmate or maybe a friend or maybe just a parent, just because you wanted to share this video because you're very excited about what you saw. Share it with someone. And if you want to help us grow and help us make sure that we put the very best in accounting topics out on YouTube, make sure you press the subscribe button and turn on that notification bell. That way you're alerted every time we post videos to this channel. Now, I do this with every one of my classes at the end of class. What did you learn from this lesson? Put that in the comment section below and I'll respond to you on what you got out of this video. So hope you enjoyed this video and we will see you in the next lesson.